Long distance. Long distance. Long distance.
Welcome to With You Podcast.
where we explore relationships and life transitions.
I am David.
And I am Tara.
I am
And
far away.
you are coming from far away. And so today we're talking everything long distance relationship because I think we're just going to have to call ourselves the long distance relationship at this point.
I think that's fair. Yeah, because I'm about 8,000 miles from you.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah, it's a long
It's
way.
far. Was that the longest flight you've ever been on?
No,
Wasn't?
no, it wasn't. So when I flew from Chicago to Bangalore, India was longer, but not by
Oh,
much.
not by much. So
And
yeah,
it was the longest I've flown over water. It was 14 hours. No, 14 hours over water.
so
Uh,
you flew from the East Coast of the United States to
to Cape Town, South Africa.
Yeah, it
I
sounds like you're having a good and intense time down there.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, it's winter, so it's weird. It gets dark at 5:30 and it's rainy and cool, but gorgeous. It's a remarkable natural habitat. I I saw penguins.
You
S
saw penguins?
yeah, 2 penguins.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah, so we may be going to a penguin beach later on, but we're right now, we're visiting people that we know and uh, getting to understand some of the political and cultural things, and it's been really good. I'm a little like right now it's late at night where I am, and it's early afternoon where you are,
Mhm.
and I think
Yeah, we're
that
used to that kind of time difference, but you're even farther in miles this time, so
I know
it's a challenge to find times to communicate.
I don't like it. I mean, even just like us getting ready for the podcast, it's so hard. Communication is so hard distance, even though we have video that we can communicate through.
Right. I know, it's better than it used to be, and we'll maybe talk about when we used to be long distance, whatever, dating. A
Yeah,
long time ago when we didn't have video calls.
I know you did love me from afar, honey, or I loved you from afar.
Maybe we need little long distance every now and then.
Yeah, we're better when we have time apart.
There's maybe a tiny bit of truth to that. Maybe we should talk about that too.
Yeah, I think the old saying is absence makes the heart grow fonder.
There you go. Good to
And
miss each other a little bit.
yeah, and just realizing how much when we're in the same space, how much we defer to each other, even like tech setup. Um, I just naturally do it without thinking about it and having to explain
Yeah.
it, and you having to do it for the first time. It was just a lot more complicated than it needed to be.
It felt complicated to me, made me think I should. It's not something I want to learn, but I probably should.
And yeah, but luckily we were able to figure it out. So
Hopefully, we'll see if this all records. If not, it was just a long distance phone call for us.
yeah, and that's nice too. I've missed you. It's only been a few days, but yeah, I'm not a big fan of long distance relationships. I don't I like the physical proximity. So this is not fun, but we did start our relationship long distance.
Well, not we didn't start it that way. Well, we kind of did, I guess. There have been certain periods of time over the course of our relationship where there's been some long distance, like we've been communicating for a longer time
I mean,
from far away.
we met and then flew to 2 different countries on 2 different continents. So, like, our
Yeah.
very first meeting led to distance.
Yes. We were not in a relationship then though. So we
Well,
weren't even
well,
trying to communicate.
I think in my head, I was in a relationship with you.
Well, that's funny because that's a different story. But yeah, we had a time while we were dating that we were apart. How long was I was in Australia and you were in Michigan for 3 months.
Yeah,
something like
maybe
that.
4 months.
And so I thought, when we decided to talk about the idea of long distance relationships, it would be really fun if I could find the letters that you wrote to me when I was in Australia
Oh, no, no.
on the blue airform paper, and we did a lot of letter writing. I
Yeah,
I know those are still somewhere, but I
it's
don't really know where.
probably in your hope chest.
Oh, chest, that's an old-fashioned thing that I never did and do not have.
I think we are people that have dated long distance from a whole nother era, because I'm not even sure people understand what airmail blue forms were, right? There were these like really thin blue pieces of paper that would fold up in three ways and then have sticky
Mhm.
side and top, and you would send it, and it would take, how long did it take for my mail to get to you?
I mean, I think it was maybe a week. So, yeah, which really slows down communication because you're writing me about something that's going on in your life. I open that and read it a week later. I might reply to that. So the earliest you're getting any sort of reaction to that letter is 2 weeks after you wrote it.
Right. And a lot has changed then. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was a stilted way of conversation, but it also meant I shared what was really important, and I didn't share all the nonsense that we would talk about in person.
I think you even drew pictures.
I may have drawn pictures, and I think I put my hand to poetry once or twice. I'm so glad you haven't found those, because I worry.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
so disappointed I couldn't have surprised you by reading one of those on air.
oh, I would have been uncomfortable. 'Cause I was what I thought was romantic, which is really cheesy. I didn't know what romance was, and so I tried to be like a greeting card. "Oh, my dearest, how fond I am of you." It's like, who talks like that?
I know. Someday we'll unearth those. Those were times in our relationship that we happened to have other things to do or trips or projects that were far apart, and we're living that life now too, but usually no more than like a week or
Yeah.
2 apart at the most.
I mean,
But there's people.
we did a
What's
month.
that?
2 years ago, we did a month.
We did, and we decided to never do that again. That wasn't fun.
Yeah, that was for a project, and it just I didn't like it, you didn't like it. But I think there's different reasons, right? There's reasons that couples do long distance relationships. Ours have been work and family. Those are the times that we
Mhm.
distance in our not even just in our dating, but in our marriage.
Yeah. But I mean, I've noticed, and when we did our marriage series on the podcast, and if people haven't listened to those yet, it was early days in the podcast. Um, we did a series of episodes where we listened to people's whole story about how they got together and, what their marriage was like. And I would say a good percentage of those people had a time of long distance in their relationship. And it was I was curious about what the benefits of that might be. And the reasons for it are different. We know a lot of your international students come to school in a different country, and sometimes they can't bring their family with them. So that's a longer period of long distance.
Yeah, yeah, some have done like 2 years where, the family has made a commitment to this educational endeavor, but it's the cost is super high, not just financial, but relational, and I worry a little bit, right? It's a marriage and family therapy program, and
Yeah.
because they're learning about it, they're separated in their marriage for 2 years.
Yeah. Which is
Wrong.
hard.
Wrong, just wrong. And but
Yeah. And
I think another, yeah, this is different, having the time delay, and, I can't nudge you under the table, you can't nudge me.
we're demonstrating some of the difference in long distance relationship because we've got a little bit of a delay in our audio. So we might either talk over each other or have gaps while we're waiting for the other.
I think the career in education, to kind of build on your education piece, is I also think about military. So, like your brother, he was gone
Mhm.
9 months at a pop, right? I mean, wasn't that right when he was in Desert Storm and in Afghanistan?
Yeah. Yeah. When he was on his tours of duty, I think I should have asked him, but I think it was a year one time where
Yeah.
he was away from the family. Yeah.
And so that it's not uncommon. Like initially I thought, oh, long distance relationships, it's uh, a rare thing, but it's not uncommon, I think, for
Mm-mm.
education, for military service, for work a little bit less now that there's virtual kind of working. But I think there's more people being separate for extended periods of time in their relationships than people really think about, or at least I did in my growing up.
Yeah. I know you don't think it's a normal thing, but it does happen. And there's a lot of travel for work and there's a lot of like habitual time, not the big extended 2 years for education, but we know a lot of people who travel really frequently and maybe they're gone 4 out of 7 days of the week. They come back and forth. So there's that kind of being away.
Yeah,
And what do you think, like professionally, on what the stresses are for that? Because we felt like it had a big impact on our relationship, even when you were gone just for 1 month.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to answer the professional and the personal together. So emotional loneliness, I think, especially when we've spent so much time together, our relationship really has been built on proximity and spending a lot of time together and working.
Mhm,
So when I was overseas working for that month and there wasn't a lot of work to do, um, I really started to fall apart in terms of lack of sense of emotional support, feeling disconnected. Even though we could talk on video, the time difference was frustrating, and it was just kind of I got tired of me just saying, "I miss you. I want to come home. I'm so tired." Right, and so the relationship, even the times we connected, was complaint about the situation. So I think and I do think that we see people professionally that the lack of proximity leads to a sense of isolation, disconnection, and missing out on either support during difficult times or missing out on big events. I know I missed because of travel, school, other things, funerals in my family of origin. And so that
mhm.
even family long distance, not even a committed marriage relationship, but with family, of missing rather big events in my extended family's life, led to I don't have the shared grief. I don't have the shared process. And I think that's a big piece professionally. Um, what other risks do you think there are?
I think it can be really different depending on where a couple is developmentally in their relationship, honestly, because if the couple's really early on and they're still trying to form trust and all of that stuff, I think that can be a danger of you don't know what your partner's doing or if they've got another, relationship that's going on or, that trust issue could be that's something for some couples. I don't think that was ever a struggle for us. I don't know if when you were gone for a month, you worried you were missing out on things or I was having fun with the kids without you or, you know,
Yeah.
I think it's harder for the one gone because the one at home is just living their life and is surrounded by people to hang out with.
Yeah, well, and even joyful things. So, like, I was in another country and there was festivals, and it was like they weren't fun to go to because I'd go by myself. And I realized some people live in that space of they do things alone and they enjoy that. Since we've been in our early 20s, we've been together. So for me, it was like missing part of me. And so even trying to do enjoyable things, it wasn't so much I was jealous or mistrusting, it was just the enjoyment wasn't the same without you. And so, there wasn't a lack of trust, but there was a lack of enjoyment.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a big thing that just kind of is a different way to do a relationship without having all those shared experiences. You don't have that much added to your history of things that you've done together.
I know one of the other big things for us, probably the biggest thing in our long distance relationships, whether it's week at a time or longer, is misunderstanding, not communicating well, whether it's jet lag, time zone, or just kind of what's going on in your life, what's going on in my life. We step in, even in this wonderful technology to talk, and miss each other. And I know there's been a couple of times where we've had conversations and we've both felt awful afterwards. It's like this was almost worse having a
Yeah.
conversation than just being separate, doing what we need to do, and then coming back together.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree because when you're together, like if we're in the same house and we both are having one of us or both of us are having a moment that's not like the best for connection, we can say like, I see this isn't the greatest moment for you. Maybe you're going to go out and walk in the yard we'll talk later. When we're connecting one time a day or not even every day when we're apart, that moment is that moment. It's the only moment we've got. And sometimes we're not in the same place emotionally, like to connect, or we want more than just like the 5-minute phone call, or it feels unbalanced. One person really is trying harder than the other to connect, depending on busyness and stuff.
Yeah. Well, just like even our little pre show call, right? I was trying to explain the powerful things that I've experienced and what's happened, and just kind of visiting townships and thinking about apartheid, and it's I'm in it, and trying to
Yeah.
invite you in it via video call is like it's lacking, and then it's just like, I can't even share this with you. That
Yeah.
communication, I think, is a challenge for long distance relationships, because that is a turning towards, like, I want to share this meaningful, painful experience, and it's like, oh, we missed each other, and it's almost more
Yeah.
painful than,
Right. When the other person really can't understand or join in.
yeah, and the other
Yeah.
can't as well. Um, yeah, I think there's like guilt in long distance relationships. I know sometimes when I'm having a good time on these trips, I really don't want to.
I know better when you say, "Oh, we're not having fun at all." I know it's better for you to just tell me.
I know, it's just like, oh yeah, nope, haven't done any, and I don't lie, but it's just kind of like I'm not going to tell you the whole thing. And but I mean, when you were down in Austin, it was the same thing. You're just like low keying what was going on and the fun that you're having, because you don't want to cause the other pain. But
Right.
an unbalanced kind of sharing then.
Yeah, I know, and then it feels like you're kind of highlighting the exclusion if you and you know what, there have been some times I think too where you've been on a trip like this, you've had some good times out with the people you're with, and in a way, because we've been married so long, we carry each other with us, so you imagine what you're gonna tell me about it or whatever, and sometimes years down the road you might forget that I wasn't even there. Like, you'll be talking, "Remember when that thing happened and that person said this thing?" And I'm looking at you blankly like, "I think you were with somebody else." So it is like, what parts were we actually there for with each other?
Yeah, that's true. Like I can think about, oh yeah, the 12 Apostle mountain that I just saw. Stunning. Don't you remember that when we were there? No, I wasn't
Yeah,
there with.
no.
Oh, so so problematic. And I think the last, for me, the last kind of professional piece, is how do you do conflict when you're at a distance? When, like, back to that moment thing you were talking about, you have this moment, it actually puts more pressure on conflict resolution,
Yeah.
because it's like, oh, we gotta do all the things right now because our call is going to be up in 15 minutes, and conflict doesn't work that way.
No, and I think it probably leads to it being delayed. If there is any conflict or any hurt feelings that have come up, I think it's much more likely you're not gonna talk about them because if we've got this minute to connect, like, most people don't want it to be about something negative, right? So it just gets kind of delayed or brushed under the rug.
Right. Yeah, because you're not gonna say, "Hey, honey, how are you doing? I need to talk to you about finances," and, it's just like, yeah, no, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
So I do think there's probably more I mean, it's an interesting study to do. Is there more conflict avoidance in long-term relationships or long-distance relationships than there are in person? I don't know what the findings would show on that, but it feels like there'd probably be more avoidance.
I'm guessing so, because it doesn't help you feel you're already feeling disconnected just by the distance. It's not gonna help to have to hash over something that's hard. Um, just the method of doing it's different too. Like, when we have something that we're needing to talk about that's not easy, or if we're having a disagreement, we both rely on a lot of body language and other cues to know how it's going and how to connect when we're disconnected. If we're just looking at each other on a screen, or even worse, just on audio on a phone, it's really hard to know and decode, like, how's this really going and how do I stay connected, right?
Yeah, it's the level of difficulty, which I think probably leans into some of the benefits of you really have to be intentional. The level of difficulty of doing communication, let alone conflict, from afar, requires real focus, intensity.
On the other hand, I'm sure when we're this far apart, I can't recall a time conflict has come up because we're not we're not bumping into each other, we're not having interactions that cause us to disagree. We're just touch so if there is conflict, I'd be interested to hear what people say who have more long-term, long distance stuff going on, but I'm guessing most of the conflict is gonna be about how frequent we're connecting, and that kind of stuff, because there's not much else going on unless one person's handling all the household. Like, you've had your own intensity of what you're handling there on your trip. The stuff I'm handling is shared household
Yeah,
stuff and complications. And actually, there's been a lot of chaos here since you've been gone in just 3 days, with unexpected car trouble and all sorts of things. And so I'm imagining, if there's conflict, it's like, "I wish you were here to handle this with me," or, "How can you enter in and help me?" And you've got your own stuff going on, and so we just don't deal with that.
right. The shared tasks kind of go away and it becomes transactional. I need you to do this. I need you to do that. Um,
Yeah,
Tends to be then the communication and the conflict is, hey, here's the list, and we
yeah.
problem solve versus really connect. I wonder how it was for, like, our grandparents. I think of, John and Fran Van Dyke, my grandparents. They started their relationship up until they got married, long distance, and it was letter writing, and grandpa jumped on the train and would take the train from Northern Michigan to Southern Michigan. But they did this, and their letters that I have, are all the gooey ooey, but not any part of how they were actually navigating the relationship. I don't get a glimpse into how easy, how hard, what they had to focus on. It was kind of just basically touching base and trying to keep a sense of safety, that went into the
Mm.
relationship. I know you had your great-grandparents, grandparents?
No, my grandparents on my mom's side, and I think my grandparents on my dad's side too, had some big periods of long distance in their courtship, or, before they were married. And I know my grandparents on my mom's side, I talked to my grandmother about it because she told me her whole story when we were long distance, when she was seeing all the letters come in from you and we were dating. I was staying with my grandparents in Australia. So she shared her story, and they most of their dating was via letter.
Mm,
Like, my grandfather had made the decision he wanted to marry her. I think he made that clear, and then he was off on, I can't even remember what the reason was, but he was farther away, and writing. My grandma said he was writing on anything he could get his hands on, because I think she was in the city and he was out remotely in Australia, on the move, and writing on wrappers, on little scraps of paper, and I'd never got to see those, but it sounded like it was mostly like, this is what, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm doing, trying to share what he was involved in so she could understand his life. Probably not a lot of emotional, you know, connection kind of stuff, just sort of factual stuff. But that's how their relationship started.
Well, and I think we probably I think about our relationship, I think Grandy and Granddad, my grandparents, there was a lot more curiosity. I think if we really looked at the conversation we do, there's a lot of filler and a lot of nonsense. Mostly me, in terms of a lot of nonsense. But when you have a letter that's going to take weeks to months to go back and forth, you're going to be a little more precious with your words. You're going to be a little more
Mhm.
with your words and cutting through the folderol in
The folderol, using new vocabulary.
well, I feel
Yeah,
like
and
I'm
when
back in the 19th century now, so I have to talk like you know,
right,
a British
right, gobbledygook and yeah.
folderol.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. When your lives are far apart, you want to have some sort of you wanna have your partner understand what you're seeing and doing and thinking and feeling. So there are I mean, I would say that there's some real benefits to some time apart because of that, because when people communicate, especially via letter, it's a very different way you're communicating. It's very different things, and sometimes you can go deep a lot faster because you're sitting with your own thoughts. You're thinking, "What do I really wanna share?"
Yeah, and being vulnerable. Um, so I would you say there's stronger communication skills needed in especially letter writing? I don't know about the Zoom, like, Zoom high tech part of it, but I feel like distant delayed communication, you probably had to be better.
Yeah, yes, you definitely it was a different skill set for sure because it was handwritten. You also learned a lot about somebody by seeing the letters written with their own hand. There's very different sort of intimacy with that. I can still remember what my grandmother's handwriting looked like.
Mm,
And my dad, I got letters from my dad when I was in college. Like, there's something about the handwritten note that's personal, that their hand actually touched it, that they had those thoughts that they wanted to put on paper. So it's a different skill set than the way we communicate long distance now on video. Um, but I think it does require some very intentional communication skills,
yeah.
right? To stay connected despite all that distance. So, like, it's time, it's, intentional setting up those connection points. It's finding creative ways to feel like I know something about what you're experiencing.
It's interesting you talk about that because. I actually do some technique that's similar to letter writing for couples that are high conflict and missing each other. And it's kind of the journal exercise where you journal to your partner, kind of what's been going on in your thoughts, feelings about the behavior. You leave it on the pillow. They read it, journal back, and it breaks down some of the things that we like as the nonverbals that help us connect, but sometimes there can be so many cues coming at you that lead to defensiveness or old patterns that there
Mhm.
needs to be distance in community. It doesn't even have to be distance like us being on the other sides of the world from each other, but distance in terms of breaking up the in-person sequences to allow for some new conversation to happen. And that writing down, being intentional, introspection, really sharing, like me having time to think about what I want to share and sharing it without getting stirred up by, oh, you rolled your eyes, or I think you rolled your eyes, which then stirs up emotions that move me out of maybe what my initial intent was to communicate. Um,
Mhm.
this back and forth. It's not letter writing, it's journaling, but it's that idea. So I think, some of the distance can be helpful
Mhm.
slowing down reactive couples and breaking out of some of the maybe more problematic nonverbal communication.
Yeah, I was also thinking about our oldest son and our daughter-in-law who the whole first let's see, I'll have to think back to think how long it was that they were long distance, but they started out long distance because they met on a study abroad program when both of them were still in college, and they lived in separate states, and they drove back and forth to see each other, and it seemed to go really well from the start, but they didn't want to take the next step in their commitment until they lived in the same town because rightfully so, they realized there was some sort of fantasy world to their relationship when they only saw each other once a month. It was just, "Oh, it's so nice to be together. We're just gonna do all the fun things. We have all these big outings planned," because you had time to think and plan what you're gonna do together. We're gonna go to a museum, or we're gonna go to a great, wine bar or whatever. And they're like, "We don't know what it's like to live every day with each other, and we need to know that before we decide to move forward." So, I think that was really smart of them and wise to realize that living apart can can sort of mask some of the things that might come up if you're doing everyday life together.
And kind of another kind of argument for benefit. Um,
Mhm.
and I think we've talked about this before. We've had friends where they would have a Sunday a month and ended up being 2 Sundays a month, but they would go into the city or a weekend and have alone for their own spiritual walk. And because just like
Like
you're
separate time, like
separate,
intentional separate time.
kind of the same thing you were saying about our kids of needing together time because they had so much separate time. This couple was realizing losing themselves or trying to be what their partner wanted them to be and kind of losing track of, okay, how do I really share what's going on for me? I don't have the space, time, um, opportunity to really delve deeply into that introspection. And they'd take a day. So out of a month, they'd have 2 days separate that could enrich in their relationship because they bring something that maybe gets distracted by the daily grind and living together all the time.
Yeah, I definitely think there's truth to that because I think that's one benefit of when we spend a week apart is I realize how much my daily patterns are just affected by molding to yours and, probably vice versa. So maybe you realize some things when you're apart from me that you do just because you can do whatever you want to do and same. So like when you're gone in our house, there are things that I just do things differently when you're not around because we have our different sort of rhythms and they're natural when we're together because it's just what we've built together. But I realize when you're gone, the TV doesn't get turned on, not even once.
So you don't hear
It's a pattern.
no ESPN.
There's no ESPN happening in this house at all when you're gone.
I found a rugby channel here in South Africa that I'm watching. But yeah, I think you're right that those patterns change and it can be really even enjoyable. I think if the relationship is there's emotional safety and security,
Mhm.
that can be a blessing and a growth. If there's not, I could easily hear us both saying, "Oh, life is so better without the other."
Right, right.
Oh, I get to do what I want to do now. And so it actually leads to a drift apart. For us, there's a sense of stability, safety, desire to be together, and an appreciation of the uniqueness and separateness that we reconnect with. And so it can be the same exact time away can be a building block, or
Mhm.
be a rationale for ending a relationship.
Right, right. Realizing, like, actually,
My life is
it's
better.
life is much better with you gone, which,
Yeah.
I mean, it could be a true realization for some people. I think, yeah, we're much more balanced in just our, like, appreciation of it's good to change my rhythms up every now and then and, read late into the night because 'cause I'm not bothering anybody or whatever, but then also appreciating what we have when we're back in our together rhythm.
And I think the together rhythm then we need to we need to have those conversations of wow when we were separate here's some of the practices that we had individually that were meaningful to us. How do we build that in And it's that idea of homeostasis. We get into balance and we just continue to do what we do, and it's harder to change. But with a little space, it might provide opportunities to do our relationship differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ask, ask
Like when you're gone, I always get some huge project done. Like I just need to stay busy. I don't know
well,
what it is.
I do. I just called you and you said, I'm emptying out the garage. And I'm like, oh no.
It's something we've needed to do together for like a couple of years, and you're gone, and I'm like, all right, I'm doing it. And I'm making a big pile for Goodwill, and I'm moving things around and making space.
Now, it could be hurtful if all the pile to Goodwill is only my stuff.
It's not.
I know, but
He'll never know.
he won't miss this. But I think that's the idea of like, are we so entrenched in doing things the same way, even though developmentally maybe we're at different places or the context has changed? I think a little time apart allows for a recalibration of what do we want to continue to do and what changes do we need to be making, and be able to look at that, I think is a strength that we could talk through. It kind of gives us the optimal frustration for change, as the developmentalist in me would say.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
being is frustrating. There's good things, but it'll frustrate our relationship a bit. That allows for something new. If we're willing to enter into that. And I think I appreciate you more. I know when I go on these trips, I appreciate you a ton of like, I miss you, but it's just like, oh, it gives me a good perspective of what you bring into my life. Where when it's really close, it's either taken for granted or I don't see it.
Wow. Well, that's good.
Yeah. So I gain in gratitude and appreciation. And I think that also helps to foster some change and growth in our relationship. Um
Yeah.
one-
Do you know of any long distance relationships? Like we know a lot of people who've had long distance, and most of the ones I can think of, it was actually strength building for them. Like they were able to maintain their feeling of connection and communication while they were far apart. And then they ended up living in the same town, thankfully, and building their life together at some point. But I'm sure it's sometimes the deal breaker or the thing that reveals that this isn't gonna work because we can't maintain it this way or we don't want to. Do you
yeah.
know of any stories like that?
Yeah, I think in marriage and family therapy, there's a kind of controversial intervention. So if couples are struggling, the idea of separation, which is uh either a choice by the couple or a therapeutic intervention. And the question is separation a reasonable thing to help couples become closer? Or does it just is the catalyst for the trajectory towards ending the relationship? And I go back to I think about lots of couples where they're like, we just need time apart. Um, and there's already frustration built in, and the time apart then leads for reorganizing life and leads to the developing separate. um
Yeah.
I've seen that a lot to the point where I'm not I feel like if there's crises, unless it's safety issues, that separation or long distance relationships at that point are much more of a threat than something that's life-giving. It goes back to like, I feel we're in a good place, and so these times apart actually bring us together. If we weren't in a good place, I would really think long and hard about doing some of the projects, having you doing some of your projects that would lead to us having longer distance, because I think there's not the safety and security as a launching pad for us to do that. It ends up being an escape from what we're feeling. And so those are the
Yeah.
stories that come to mind without getting into clients. I
Right. Well, I think that can be a danger even in a healthy relationship is that if we spend a long enough time apart, I can even see how it gets easy to reorganize my life in a way that I just get really comfortable in my own patterns, and then it feels like when you re-enter the situation, it's like an intrusion, like we have to recalibrate, and there's a time of figuring out how this works together. And I know that, like, for my brother with his military service and stuff, they really tell people that when you come back, there's a transition time that's really hard with reintegrating into family life. And I think that's one of the dangers that probably people have to realize, that it's sometimes each person has to sort of now reconfigure what life looks like together. And it, as it feels hard, it can feel like, oh, maybe we were better apart. But I don't think that's always true.
Yeah, and it's almost living a fantasy. So there's the recalibration part. Um, and I was, I'm not gonna lie, I missed a little bit of what you said because I thought maybe I should bring chocolate or maybe I should buy something at the airport for Tara. Of like, how does
That's not what I'm talking about.
no, but here's the crazy, at least this male's crazy mind of it's how do I make the reentry less intrusive? And if your love language was gifts, that would be a good fit. Your love language is not gifts, so that would just be
Yeah.
more annoying. That it's just
Yeah,
like
because it's more stuff.
you're trying to, yeah, I'm emptying out the garage. Now you bring back more stuff from South Africa. What's wrong with you? Um, right. But you can see how even the conversation could lead to a feeling of threat, like, oh, I'm pretty comfortable. And you feel like an intrusion. It's like, oh, how do I not feel like an intrusion? But then you start going to solutions that might not actually be helpful. And being able to talk about it. I think
Right.
the other piece is the fantasy part of, oh, well, yeah, I can reorganize my life this way, uh, but it's kind of an escapist reorganization. Like everything will be so much better without Tara around. And parts of it might be, but
Might be when you're living in a hotel room and getting meals, that you don't have to cook and stuff, that's not reality.
you know what I'm eating, given that I'm on the ocean? Lots and
Y
lots of fish, uh,
Yeah, I bet.
which causes a relational problem.
Why is that?
Well, because the smell of cooking it in our house, it's
That's not a relational problem. It's just not something we live in the Midwest. I don't feel like we're in a place where we have a lot of nice fresh seafood.
that's true. But that fantasy can be seductive for couples
Mhm.
living apart for a time being. So there it's gonna be different for each couple. I think you have to think about these variables, as you plan, uh, to have a
Yeah, well, most separations I think are not planned. It's just inevitable because of work issues, or, you know, whatever it is, it's or education, whatever's keeping people in different places. But always, I think if both partners are making an effort to connect, that's going to help smooth over the time so that it doesn't feel like you're farther apart when you do get back together.
So it feels like we're in the section of the conversation of what makes it work. We've kind of talked about things
Hmm.
that are threats, things that might be beneficial. How do we make this work? What things have we learned that have have been practical tips to love each other from afar?
So I don't know. What have we done other than just staying in touch? Staying in touch with each other, trying to read how the other's doing when we do get to talk on the phone or video call. And I know when you were gone for that longer period and you really were lonely, it was harder to even meet you where you were at, because usually, because of the time difference when we talked, I was in the middle of a lot of stuff, getting dinner on the table or whatever, and you wanted a longer time to chat. We probably didn't do well at planning that time, so we both could just be present.
Yeah, I think those rhythms of uh when I would call, it would be late at night my time, and it would be middle of the day working for you. How do you kinda coordinate when's the setting up for success and when you can have those conversations, and how often, like, it doesn't you don't need to check in every day or multiple times a day, but you do need to know what expectations are about checking in. And I made a mistake, even on this trip, right? So I was going to video call you, and
Yeah. And so when you landed, happened to be Sunday morning, and you knew I was in church, so you didn't want to video call me because I was sitting in church,
well,
but
no,
you happened to
I didn't
text and
remember.
send pictures.
I,
Say
I
that again?
I didn't remember that you were in church. So I was going to video call. And as soon as I got my phone, I got a text from a friend who was sitting behind you in church. That all he said was, "Oh, I hear that you're in South Africa. I'm sitting behind your Tara and your daughter, and it's just lovely to see them." And I'm like, "Ooh!" So I text him right back. I'm like, "Ooh, thanks," because I almost video called Tara in the middle of church, and I appreciate. And then we got talking and texting back and forth, and I sent him a beautiful picture of where I was.
Yeah, and so he told me after church, "Oh, man, I got a lot of messages and some beautiful pictures from in South Africa," and I'm like, "I didn't get anything."
And I was like,
So,
"Well."
yeah,
And my internal clock was, I'm gonna wait for a time, like rhythm kind of thing. I'm gonna wait for a time to when I can have a conversation with Tara, but I didn't let you know that. So that's the intentional part that's problematic. Of I developed a plan in my head, and implemented said beautiful plan, but didn't tell you. And you were like, your text was, "Hey, a little love here too, please."
I know, I was trying to be funny because
And I was
yeah,
like, "Oh, no."
uh-oh. The
So,
other big no-no for us when we're far apart is misremembering the time difference and waking me up in the middle of the night or really early in the morning, and that because of my work and being on call. No, don't worry, you didn't do that.
I
You look
worried
like you're
that today you were like, "Where's the lunchbox?" And I responded, and then I'm like, "Ooh, it's like midnight or
Yeah, I texted that at midnight because our daughter and I were up having a girls' night watching movies. So I was like, I think he's just getting up in the morning, and I have a logistical question.
Well, it created a lot of stress sweat for me because I was like, "Do I respond or not?" Because I
If
know
I ask the
I
question,
will be put on the naughty list if I respond and wake you up.
yes, yes, that is a thing that is a danger when you're in 2 different time zones because my phone's always on, and if you're texting me well-meaning, dates and pictures, and it's at 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, and it's waking me up, it's not a pleasant exchange.
Yeah, so that the rhythm of communication of pre-designed and making expectations clear. And I know most of the time I know not to respond to you until late at night here because I'm usually 8 hours ahead of you. And so
Yeah.
like, clear expectations too. Like you wanted to hear from me, and I was like, "Oh, I'll get to it," and that could have caused a problem.
Yeah, I was glad you responded about the logistical question at midnight, though, because we were looking for something that you put away, and none of all 3 of us in the household searched high and low and could not find it. So the text I sent you was, "If I were this item, where do you think I would live?" Just to try to get in your head a little.
And
And all of us were like, "Really?" Because we were like, think like David, think like dad." None of us could get in your head. We couldn't find it.
yay. Well, that's a success for me. I wanna keep you all on your toes.
You
But,
did.
by the way, did you I never heard back of if you found it or not.
Oh, yeah, I found it later. Yeah, and I yes,
Was it where
I
I thought
found
it
it, and
was it where I thought it
it
was?
was exactly where you said, but none of us could see it there,
That is remarkable. Well, yay,
which is another reason I'm cleaning out the garage
I can't wait for us to play hide and seek when I get home. I seem to be pretty good at it.
of hiding things. Yeah, well, you just do that naturally without intending to. Putting away things that seem like they make sense to you, but not to any of us.
That's true. So what other work about?
Oh, for communication with somebody you're I think what you said is the most important thing is just the expectations, because I think that's where we could miss each other and probably have missed each other when we're far apart is how often are we touching base? When is that happening? One person neither of us are super long phone conversation kinds of people. I
Yeah,
mean, we probably had some longer conversations when we were dating and lived apart, but we're not one to sit on the phone for hours. So it's usually pretty functional. Like if we have a conversation, it's like a pretty quick update. If we have any, you know, questions that are just like everyday stuff, we do that. I tend to like more text check-in, like just a small text like, "Hey, saw this sunset and thought of you," or just whatever, little touching base things. But a couple or whatever family members that are far apart figure that out in ways that work. And for us with our parents, so not in a dating relationship but with our parents when we were in college, we had a set time, because we also didn't have cell phones, so you couldn't text, but, like, Sunday afternoon was always a phone call. I think it's good with anybody you're away from to just have some sort of expected check-in time, just so everybody's not wondering, "Has it been too long? Has
yeah,
it been too much?" At least having some sort of agreed upon time rhythm, whether it's once a week, whether it's every day, whatever it is.
yeah, and hopefully, the expectations, the setting that up, and the time on the call are, a good fit for both of you. Like, you and I are both functional. It's just like, "What's the purpose? What do you have to say? We're moving on." But our like, one set of our kids, they could be on the phone for hours and just doing life together. So this idea of shared ordinary life, and it's easier now with like when you were in Australia and I was in the States, a phone call was hundreds of dollars.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah. It
so
was prohibitive. You couldn't talk on the phone.
you had to be very focused if we were going to talk on the phone, only for minutes. With technology now, you can have a Zoom call forever. Um, or a FaceTime call. And our kids were good at doing ordinary life together, that you're watching a movie together. There can be kind of time together enhanced by the technology that's different than it was when we were growing up.
Yeah, I think we still don't really understand that because we've had an experience recently where we checked in with some young people, or we got invited to be part of a Zoom call with some young people we traveled with a long time ago. And so we us a Zoom call is sort of like what's happening here. Like we get on the screen, you talk about some sort of topics, catch up and sign off. Usually an hour is plenty.
Yeah.
But this was
I know
something we never
we're both getting a little tired of this conversation already. It's like it's long.
well, I know, and I'm aware that you're probably well past your bedtime where you are, so I'm gonna let you go soon, but but this was, like maybe this is more normal than we know, but these young people got the Zoom calls set up, and then we got on and we're looking around and half the screens are empty, and we're like, "What's the agenda? Where is everybody?" And they just had an open channel to feel like they were in the same room. So they would come on and talk. They would walk back and forth. They would go get ice cream and sit and eat it farther away from the screen in the room, pop in and out. It was so fascinating, but it was another way they felt connected because, we all were in a space together, um, with a shared purpose, living in another country, and then we all lived in different states in the US and other places, and they did this I think we got uninvited because we didn't understand the rules, and we're a lot
Oh,
older than they are.
yeah, and it was yeah, no, I was it was a mutual, let's not do that again.
No, because it was like it was just fascinating to be there and realize, okay, this is a whole different game here. This is a way and for them, it was really, fulfilling, like, they were connected because they were just living their life, and their friends were just on the screen if they so happened to walk by and see them, and they left it open for hours. And
Yeah.
we just didn't we're like, "I don't understand."
Well, and we sat here like this of like, where is everybody? Are we
We're
done
just our
talking?
faces are just sitting on the screen like, "Hey, where'd everybody go?"
So our lives stopped for 4 hours while they just kind of kept doing things. And it's just like,
Yeah, we're like, "I don't think we can do that again."
no. But I do get it. And that's something for everyone to think about of what works for us might not work for others, but are you implementing this, setting rhythms, being intentional, talking about the expectations, setting goals together? Like, is a touch in just enough? How do we not just have problems, but also joys and normal conversation of just like, hey, I'm tired. And that's where it is. The last thing that I think is super important, and it goes to the trust, intimacy, is to really have accountability when you're traveling
Mhm,
far. There can be escapes that people seek out in intimacy.
mhm,
One of the things in almost all of my travels is I always travel with another accountability partner.
mhm.
Another we travel to in pairs to do our work because we're trusting each other, we're mentoring, we're there to support each other and hold each other accountable to our relationship back home. And I think that can be problematic if there's separation and there's isolation that the individual is left to their own devices.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that's a really good point too, and goes back to that trust thing that we talked about early on. For some people, that's a real challenge. And I think partly it's not for us because we established a lot of trust early in our relationship, but also because those safeguards are built in. We let each other track each other, and we share our phones with each other. We have no kind of secrets on our communication and where we're at, which helps just feel free to, I'm happy for you to check where I am, where my phone is. That's
Yeah.
always with me.
And same, like you should take screenshots of where I am in Cape Town of like seeing but that also requires lots of monitoring and you and I are just like, whatever.
Yeah, we don't care enough to do that unless it's for safety or, but it's there. It's there so that we know that each other can, we can find each other, and there's an open safeguard for accountability.
Yep. So as with a lot of our relational advice and conversations, the answer is to our long distance relationships helpful or beneficial? It depends. It depends on who you are. It depends on your past. It depends on the trust level in your relationship. It depends on the accountability and intentionality. So it's not right or wrong, but there's ways that you can make it more beneficial or more problematic, and it really be unique to all of you.
Yeah. And you look like you're getting more and more tired.
Yeah,
So I
I have one last thing to say.
okay.
Thank you, listeners. Please leave a comment that helps others find us. Subscribe, like, share, and don't be too distant. Bring us with you. We can be a friendly voice in your ear wherever you are in the world.
You can't get rid of us. We're always here.
Even if we're not on the same continent,
So
we're
join in. We considered taking a week off because we're so far apart, but we thought this is a perfect way to talk about how to stay connected when you're far away from somebody. And so since you are listening to us from all over the world, we do invite that. We'd love you to connect. So the ways you can do that are sharing it with your friends, writing a review, sending us an email. We love to not feel alone in what we're doing.
and we might even read it on air to then discuss what you say.
That'd be fun.